Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. Have a question or comment, you can send it to us live at DJ@ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are, your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, Z-Man. And yes, it is Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Yes, here we are.
Here we are, and tonight we have an interesting show. As most of the world, if not most of America, certainly knows, tonight is the 17th anniversary of the of 9/11, and you don't even have to say anything more than that set of numerals, and everyone knows what you're talking about.
Indeed.
And the news, and rightly so, has been full, and social media has been full of the images of that day. And unless you really are a young person, you were alive when it all happened. So we all have our own memories and our own sort of, cultural knowledge of what happened. And how, in essence, in an instant, the world was changed for us. But tonight we wanted to talk. Our show wanted to be was going to be more focused on the fact that we all experience these sort of anniversaries, these sort of reminders of loss. This is a cultural anniversary, a reminder of a tragedy that happened to us all, 17 years ago. But we all have similar individual anniversaries where things that happen to us, the cycle of the year goes on, and the day occurs, or the event, the day that the event happened comes up again,
Right.
and it all comes kind of crashing back in on you.
Yeah, the anniversary comes, and it depends on how traumatic and how fresh it is in your memory. I know that it does take time to be able to come back to that time of the year and not relive it again, especially if it's been traumatic. You go through a series of recall that in the early days was just all-encompassing. It's absolute recall of what had happened. And it does take distance to be able to begin to talk about it without falling into a heap, or to be able to talk about it with other people who have also gone through something similar. And the fact that, this is a marked cultural event, or a direct attack against a nation by another nation, and it affected a lot of people, not just, one or two, or a real small group, but it affected thousands of people.
Directly.
And when that happens, the country itself, all those that are in that affected group, and people watching this, sitting there going, I'm just a normal person. I'm no different than the person I'm seeing on television. And suddenly this comes out of the blue. How can this possibly be? Disbelief is always your first step. Am I dreaming? Am I having a nightmare? What's going on? And as that's working there, or living somewhere there, or supposed to be on their way there, or flying in, That's when it all opens up, and you're dealing with a different reality. It's like it's not the world I knew, where everything's unfolding and going at its own pace. This is a world that is completely different from what I understand. And whenever you have a traumatic event happen to you, it is exactly that sequence that unfolds. You do go into this denial mode. This cannot be happening.
Right.
And then in the last show we talked about, throwing that into a I can't think about it too much mode.
Right. Sort of putting it into a box.
Because I don't understand what's going on, and I can't embrace the fact that this person may not be there instantaneously. I've got to put that in a box for a minute, just because I don't know that for sure. Is this person really gone? What's going on? No. There's just conflict, internal conflict. And you have to really ground and say, okay, I know nothing right now. Let me take a step and find out what's actually going on. And it's an internal discipline. You really, because it's so easy to fall into worry. It could be. Yeah, it could be an awful lot of things at any given moment. But what is actually happening? That's always the question. It's like, okay, let's not dive into an emotional response.
Exactly, and this was the immediacy of the event, and for you and for me and for millions of other people who were alive then, the memories are kind of burned into your psyche. But then time passes, and in this particular, in the case of the World Trade Center attack, you might have known somebody who was affected directly, or you yourself, your own family might have been affected directly. And to the extent that you were personally involved, it becomes a trauma. It becomes something which is a life-changing event. But even for any one of us, like you said in just a moment ago, we could all see ourselves as being these kind of everyday, ordinary people suddenly caught up in something far beyond the ordinary and the normal. It became a shocking, traumatic event, which then, even to this day, I'll speak personally. I have trouble looking at the images. I have trouble thinking of especially as the anniversary reoccurs every year. You're brought back to the immediacy of the reaction. You're brought back to the immediacy of the event, and you're brought back to re-experience some of that trauma because of the anniversary, because it reoccurs, because you're triggered again, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's two things. It's reliving that trauma. It's reopening that box. And it's also you have this feeling of loss. The loss that you're experiencing may be an immediate, direct loss. You may have lost a loved one, but it can also just be the loss of who you thought you were. When something large, when a huge, large event occurs, let's say, in this case, an attack, but any kind of gigantic, traumatic event, even for people who go through a giant hurricane or something. The kind of cycle of the year that comes up and reminds you of that event puts you back partially into that event, puts you back almost in some cases, if you're really deeply affected, to have to relive, relive that event. And those feelings of loss, those feelings of displacement, of disassociation from reality, almost denial of this tremendous change that's going through your life, kind of burns something into you, which you don't even necessarily know that you've got to kind of re-experience. You can be, in a personal event, you have a loss, a tragic personal loss. You lose your father, you lose your mother, you lose your child. The anniversary of that, and it can be several different types of anniversaries, the actual anniversary of the day, and then things that remind you of Father's Day, Mother's Day, their birthday. It brings you back viscerally to where you were and what was happening. It reminds you of them. It can re-evoke this sort of deep well of pain and some of the hurt that you felt. Kind of overwhelms you. It overcomes you. It inserts itself into your present day, and to some extent it can be debilitating. It's almost like you don't want to deny it because you're re-experiencing the loss you felt, and you're also re-experiencing the amount of significance that this person had for you.
Right. Your relationship changes, and at this age, this many years along, kind of person would he or she have been. The natural events occur around you. Babies grow up, and there's graduations and weddings, and you wonder.
Yeah.
This place that is empty in your heart because that timeline has stopped for the one that you loved. And you sit there and you want to imagine, what would this have been? And it's perfectly human to do that. Because you want the relationship to continue, and there's part of you that wants it to continue on a visceral level, a physical level, where you can touch the other person. But you understand at that point, especially as time goes on, your relationship has changed dramatically. And the love doesn't die, but the relationship is different. And coming to terms with that takes time.
And you mentioned some of the phases of that. The initial phase of loss is often denial.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the I don't know if it's 5 or 7 stages of grief, but the part of that is the sense of loss that you have, the immediate sense of loss that you have, will echo, being re-triggered, and some of the feelings that you felt then, some of the denial, some of the disassociation, some of the anger, and then the feelings that you get as the loss, as the gap widens, as you mentioned just a moment ago, the sort of the regret or the what might have beens. You say Christopher would have been, 32 or something, or 31 at this point. You think to yourself, what would this boy have been like at 31? Would the world have been afraid?
Yes.
Right, and then and you say when just to bring it back into an abstract, when someone takes another's life, and that life is no longer present on the earth, we say the damage done to the survivors is incalculable, because there's no way to know what that person's life would have meant. In that classic movie, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey, the protagonist, is given a vision of, or sort of a life of how life would have been had he not been there. He's regretting his existence. He thinks that his life is worthless, and he's about to take his own life.
Yes, he's been feeling that life probably would have been better. Everyone would have been better if I hadn't been born.
Right, and he's granted this wish to see what life would have been like without. But the reverse of that is when someone is taken from you, either in a traumatic event like a September 11th, or just a very personal loss, which we see on the Compassionate Friends, with this website where you see all these people who have lost their children or lost a loved one. There's an incalculable gap, this part of life which doesn't have that person in it anymore. And it seems to grow. It does grow as your life goes on, as the distance separates. You think, what would they have done here? How would my life be different there? What new joys or new sorrows would have been part of my life because of their continued existence? And so that becomes sort of a growing part of the loss. The loss, even though as the immediacy, the real pain of a loss does, and if you're close to a loss right now, understand that these are words of someone who's 24 years on from losing their son, losing their child. It does get different. I'm not going to say it gets better, but the immediacy, the knife in your heart, you get used to it. If that's an interesting way to put it, but it's still there. It's still pain, but you know that the relationship has changed, and you come to terms with that changed relationship. But yet, no matter what, the gap doesn't lessen the shadow. What would these people have been like at 25, at 30? Would they have had children of their own? Would they, have conquered the world or whatever it was? You never know. And so the not knowing is sort of something that you have to also fold into your sense of loss and to your and at these anniversary periods, when it comes up again,
Mm-hmm.
the birthday.
Right. No, just knowing that it's all different, and that pain is there, but I'd say you basically develop coping skills.
Yeah.
So that you eventually get to a point where people do not think of you as the person that's lost a child, or you seem normal. I love that. Love that phrase.
Oh, I love that phrase. Oh, you seem fine.
Mm-hmm.
Come here. Come on over here. Come on over here. Let me put my hands around your neck.
Mm-hmm. But you become high functioning.
That's a very good way to put it.
Mm-hmm. You understand that there's a part of you that has been deeply hurt, and words don't even encompass that. But you also understand that you have to interact with the world around you. So through the years, you begin to develop all those coping skills, so that you don't make strangers uncomfortable anymore.
Well, yeah. Yes. I mean, that's absolutely correct. Again, sort of being part of this community, and the community of loss that we're specifically part of is parents who have lost children. Your world has forever changed. If I can put it to the analogy of September 11th, the person that you were on September 10th of 2001 is not the person that you were on September 12th of 2001. There was a bright line there where the world changed for a lot of people, maybe for everybody. There's a bright line between, September 6th of 1994 and September 8th, 1994, when our son died.
Mm-hmm.
And up until he drew his last breath, we had hope that he would live. Folks, really, up until the last breath, you have hope that they will live, no matter what is told to you by whoever tells it to you. You don't give up the hope. But the reality is that he died, and we changed. You enter into a different world. There's no word for people who lose their children. There's widowers and orphans and so on and so on. But there isn't a word for parents who lose children. So you get into a place where no one else is really very comfortable with you. You know,
Mm-hmm.
It's not just complete strangers, but your own flesh and blood, your family doesn't know necessarily how to relate to you. Now, you develop over the years coping skills. You learn to figure a way to not frighten the hell out of everybody you meet. You know, the deer in the headlights look. When people would come up to you and say, "Oh," and they just stop for a second, they look at you and they're like, "What do I say to these people?" And you're like, you just have to take pity on them and you have to almost comfort them. You're the bereaved. They don't know what to say. You have to say, almost lead with, "It's okay." It's not okay. But if you don't give them anything, they just stand there with their mouth open, and it gets awkward.
Well, yeah.
It isn't true of everybody. Many people offered wonderful, sentiments of condolence, but it is just that. The ones who we could really talk to were the people who had had a similar type of loss, either a child or something very similar, very traumatic, and you can say, it's just different. It's different for everybody, but it's just different. You're in a different world.
Well, the people that you could best talk with were the ones that were brutally honest.
Yes.
Okay? They weren't afraid to be honest. They weren't afraid they're going to hurt your feelings. They just basically said, "I have no idea what you're going through right now. And, I just want to hug you."
Mm.
And that kind of, this is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah.
I don't need words of wisdom from you.
Mm.
Because they do, the impulses, you want to be able to say something that will comfort the pain you see.
Mm.
But you pull away from that, just the beginnings of that pain, and then you're left with, like, well, what do I do? I was going to say something comforting, but the look in the eyes is like, oh, Lord. So to be completely honest with what's in the heart, because right in that moment when you're speaking with the person that's lost someone that they love dearly, they can tell in that initial moment whether you're thinking of them or thinking of yourself.
Right.
If you're thinking of them, you're just, I don't know what to say or do. There's no words to describe it, but I want to hold you or hug you, or I'm so sorry.
I'm just here.
Right, I am here. That indicates that you really do care about the other person. When you think of yourself, that's when the hesitancy is there, and you try to come up with these words of wisdom, air quotes, because, well, I know someone else who has said this, and they had also lost someone. I know they give you the secondhand knowledge, which I always equated to, now, don't take offense to this, but the social workers at the hospital would do this all the time.
Yeah, and not to pick on social workers, but it so to bring it, I don't want to go too far down into there are that level of trauma requires you to change. You've changed into a different person. Then there's a period of time during which you scare people. Maybe a long period of time. They have no idea how to deal with you.
No, it's a forever thing because you understand the longer the distance is to the event for yourself. If you've lost someone, you are the one who develops the coping skills.
Exactly, and then you start you as you just mentioned, you develop the coping skills. You move yourself so that you don't scare people anymore. From our point of view, from my point of view specifically, is you add a layer on top, which is the normal you that you can deal with people again, and they look at you and say, oh. They don't say this person lost a child. They say, "Oh, you look fine," and you realize that separation becomes not just for their benefit, but for yours too. You give them what is necessary and needed, but then you know that inside there's still something that you keep to yourself, and you can only show to people who understand or who you think can handle it. You can't handle the truth.
Well, you have to make the decision that you want to do that, to put that layer on.
Yes. But then the anniversary comes. And every year the anniversary comes. And at that point you have to say to yourself, there's a need to overtly remember these people for yourself and for others. You have to say, look, this is Christopher's day. We're taking a piece out of our lives and going to go and do something for him to honor this day. And we don't, yes, people suddenly they get uncomfortable again. They're unfortunately reminded of who they're dealing with. And so that anniversary brings up both internally a remembrance of the pain, and also externally the people that are around you that now maybe know that something did happen, but they've conveniently let's be nice that they've not experienced it, so it isn't something that bothers them in the present or really at all. They're reminded of the fact that yes, maybe they should do something too. So this sort of this sort of bringing that thing back up to the fore is important for you, for us, for those who went through the loss, but it's also important to help honor that experience even through the people who know about it but need to kind of see it again, be reminded of it again.
It depends on the person. It really does. Because some people they don't want to be reminded.
No, don't.
They would rather deal with you as what they always thought you were. And and then you lost a child, but you seem to be doing really well.
Right.
So it must be just fine then, and they go into this flutter.
Must be fun.
Yeah. And you sit there and you're like, really?
Well, and we do have to go back to the studio, but I'll just say this: when we come back on the other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about allowing folks to become part of your experience, even though it is going to give both of you pain.
The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Hi, this is Pamela Foland. Check out my new book, Megan the Pet Whisperer, available at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. Please visit my website, www.pamelafoland.com. You're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Taking God on Patrol is a first-person account of the world of law enforcement from the perspective of a Christian police officer in the fourth largest city in America. From speeding car chases to the crossing of the thin blue line, author Mark S. Cariner seeks to find God's biblical truth in a behind-the-scenes look at law enforcement. And check out Mark's newest book, The Tactical Heart. Both are available at Amazon.com.
Hi, my name is Christina Garlick, and my new book, Nevada Rain, is now available. It's a sci-fi fantasy story for ages 14 and up. I hope you check it out, and of course enjoy. Also, you're listening to the ArtistFirst Radio Network that has a station for everyone.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indy Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir, There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Thank you for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now back to your hosts. It's Margaret and Michael Lyons.
Thank you, Z-Man. And yes, you are listening to The Soul of the Everyman. And our discussion today is revisiting your loss and pain whenever an anniversary or something comes up to remind you of the person that you've lost. And the second half hour, we were going to discuss what, dear?
We've lost the bubble of the first half hour. Well, in the first half hour, what we were talking about basically was, the immediacy of loss, and tying it a little bit to the trade tower disaster itself, because this is the anniversary of that 17 years ago today. We as people, as human beings, are, whether we like it or not, we're kind of tied to the cycle of our lives, the cycle of the year. And into each year, events occur which may or may not be incredibly significant. They may change us dramatically. September 11th sort of changed America, changed the world. But in all of our individual lives, and in Margaret and my life particularly, we have traumatic events which change you. They can be the loss of a loved one. They can be a personal experience that you go through that's highly traumatic. The people who were running in the Boston Marathon, which was bombed, these people went through a traumatic experience, and it changed their lives. So when you have the traumatic loss, there are stages, the immediacy of the loss, There's sort of a period of time during which you heal outwardly so that you look, quote unquote, normal.
Right. And there's also the physical aspect of that too, because the body remembers in that annual fashion that you had undergone some type of traumatic event on this particular time of year. And so it goes into almost a body memory of the stressor that was on you.
Yes, certainly. But I mean, I was just saying that there's a period of time at which you've become what you appear to be healed, but then the anniversary will occur, and yes, you have body memory. You have a particular trigger. It can be a physical, a smell, a song, a place, or a time. When people who personally went through the tragedy of 9/11 hear a particular song, they hear those bells ring, they hear the voices of their loved ones in these terrible recorded cell phone messages. These are triggers which bring them right back to that immediacy. Even seeing the images for all of us brings us back, if we were alive at the time, to our own personal experiences. And then on the individual plane, the recurrence of the anniversary of a loved one's passing, their birthday, holidays, and so on, they mark the time that has gone by. They remind us of who we were then, who we are now, of who the person who is no longer in our lives might have been. That sort of, what would they have been doing now? Kind of, I'll call it a regret, but it's really almost a void that you say, well, imagination starts to try and fill. And then you have, the sort of the reenactment of the pain that comes back up in yourself. And I was saying before we went to the break that the folks who are close to you in a personal tragedy, let's say in your family, have, I don't want to say this in any way because we're all guilty of it, but you forget. You don't live the immediacy of another person's tragedy. You just don't. The loss of someone's father to you is oh, I'm so sorry event. To them, it was a searing, burning, soul-changing, I'll never be the same again event. So there's no way that you can feel the loss of someone else's father as deeply as they feel. So when the event comes back, and you said it last half hour, and I'll just say it again, and that person is going through that hell again. Their father's birthday has occurred. They're getting married, and their father's not there to give them away. Whatever the event is, and you can see that they're in pain. The human response, the right response, is not to say, "Oh yeah, I lost my father too. Oh yeah, my dog just died. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah." All these horrible kind of banal, "Oh, I know what you're going through" type of things. The right response is, "I don't know what you're going through. I can't understand it except to say, I'm here for you. I see you're in pain. And as another human being,
Mm-hmm.
I honor the pain that you're in. I too have had pain, but it's not the moment, no matter how tempting it is. It is not the moment to say, I'm also in pain. Would you like to hear about my pain? Because that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, when you understand that someone is being triggered and reminded of their pain, what you have to do is say to yourself, let me just open myself, grounded, centered, honest, and say, I see you're in pain. I know that there's nothing I can do except be here.
Right. And I'm so sorry that you have to go through.
Right. And it's not the sorrow of, I wish you could never have to experience any pain, because life unfortunately has pain. It's the sorrow of knowing that the pain that you're going through is a human pain, and I honor that
Mm-hmm.
by just being here and saying to you, I'm here to hear, to witness, to just be with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing more than just to be an ear to hear.
I stand with you.
I stand with you.
It's a simple thing, but very important. People honestly believe they have to go do something to help this other person, and that person's being state is grief right now. It's loss, it's pain. And telling another person about your experience does not validate them, does not open a space for this person just to be. You're refocusing the interaction on you. And what do you have to do with it?
Right.
And it's like, no, honoring a person's state of being is what it's about. Doesn't mean you like it or you don't like it. It has nothing to do with your opinion, but it has everything to do with standing and holding space for that person to go through the experience or the re-experience that they're having in that moment in time. It is the greatest gift you could possibly give to another individual. And again, it's not about you.
Yeah, I want to stop right there for a second because that's such an incredible point. You have, and I'm just reiterate it, you have to validate their experience by not putting your experience into it. By courageously, by fearlessly putting yourself in the position of listening and accepting and not putting you, opening yourself and just saying, I am an ear, I am allowing your experience and validating your experience, and not saying, oh yeah, just last week my dog died and it was so horrible and I know exactly how you feel. It was horrible, 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 horrible. Let me tell you all about how horrible I felt. Well, look, we've completely turned it around from somebody who is dealing with a horrible tragedy to let's talk about me.
And how horrible I feel.
Right. And you...
And how does that... See, that's the interesting point to my mind. How do you honestly feel that that is going to help the other person? Or are you basically opening a little steam valve because you yourself haven't processed that pain? You can go process your own pain, and you basically are looking for someone to witness for you what you originally, the intention was to help this other person, and you were going to witness them. But it's turning around and you're trying to force the other person into a position where they're going to witness your pain and validate you.
Right.
And it's very interesting to see that. It's done, it may not be done consciously, but it is done often.
Mm. And what happens is the person who's, let's not talk about whose pain is greater. The person who initially was triggered by some event, the anniversary of a traumatic event, and feels safe enough to share it with you, knows right away that, you know what, instead of me sharing my pain that was triggered on this day, I now have to turn it around and minister to you, to the other. And you say, well, I'm never going to do that again with you. But you've, the experience of the reminder of your trauma has been almost it's almost been made worse in some ways by this sort of saying, well, if anytime I want to talk about the pain that I'm in, all I'm getting back is, oh yeah, let me tell you all about me. And so you stop doing that.
Well, it only takes an instant and you realize this person is not providing a safe space. There's no use opening up to this because all they'll do is fill it with their stuff.
Right.
And what you're in the experience, you would rather just have it by yourself and go through it by yourself than having to share with another, because all that you're getting is this constant flow of, oh, yes, I know exactly how you feel. It's like, no, the honest response is, even if we both have had a similar experience, it's not exactly the same, and it will never be.
Right.
To honor another person's individual experience is a gift. And again, I go back to, this is the realm where we may dream the common dream. You may share in a common dream. But sharing doesn't mean that you've got to completely take charge of the conversation and the sharing and then dictate the direction. Sharing is, this is what I have, and letting another person look at it to see what it is that you are in.
Well, and receive it.
And receive it, and then in conversation, give it back to the other person that had given it to you and say, yes, I see. And I also see this part of it, on how patient you were, or how brave you were, or how much courage it took for you to be able to do that.
Right, and validating it.
Instead of, well, of course, I know exactly how you feel.
Right, which is rejecting it and substituting in your own. So I mean, to extract this, what we're really saying is that all of us have these personal tragedies. Let's just call it what they are, and no one, to use the Soul of the Everyman tagline, no one gets off the planet alive. Well, no one also gets off the planet without tragedy. It happens. It's
unavoidable.
It's an unavoidable part of living here. It just happens. So, because we are beings that live in time, we are reminded of these tragedies in time. In some ways, time is a blessing because it gives you the time to deal with the tragedy, to actually process it and come to a point with it. Maybe not completely done, but you've made some progress, and you almost want to say to the person, "I'm hurting, but here's where I am now." So the human being part of the receiver is an incredibly important role. You have to if someone trusts you enough to offer you the gift of their pain. Because that's what it really is. Here's my experience. It was a painful, bad thing that happened to me. And you have to say, I'm willing to hear that and to accept it and to observe something, validate some part of it, and then give it back. That's human being behavior that we're trying to, that is I hesitate to say the correct way, but it's the much more honest way of helping someone else deal with.
It's an open-hearted way, and it's
open-hearted.
It's a perspective that allows for the human heart, to express itself, because the human heart must express itself. That's why we're down here. And that space of expression is something that is taken for granted. A true expression of the heart is a precious thing. Or to the being of the individual in front of you. And to make space so that it can grow or grow in expression. It's almost sort of when you have little children and you try to make space for them to explore what it is they're feeling in that moment, let them talk it through and sort of gently give words to what they're feeling, whether it's an emotion or a thought, whatever it is that they're experiencing. Growing in the experience, growing in your vocabulary of feeling and thought and instinct.
And it takes courage. I believe one of the reasons that when someone shares their pain with you is because it's so real, it's so germane, it's so human that your first reaction is you feel frightened because this is such a human thing that happened to them. It could happen to you. It could be something that is so terrible that you don't want, you almost want to reject it out of fear. The courage to open oneself is the courage to possibly be hurt, or rather, taking the risk of feeling their pain. When someone shares their pain with you, your heart is going to echo that pain if you have a heart. If you are a human being, our hearts are rent by another's pain. We feel it because we see themselves. Again, the soul of the everyman means because we all have those feelings. If someone shares their pain with you, you feel an echo of their pain. Well, we all would like to reject and escape pain. So opening oneself is a risky business. You mentioned earlier safe space. Someone has to feel safe enough to share their pain with you, and then you have to be brave enough to accept it, and realize that you're not going to be hurt by this. You're going to grow. You have to realize that.
You will be uncomfortable.
You will be uncomfortable because you're opening up a space, and that space is being filled with another's pain, and you have to accept it and realize that it is something that's now part of you too. But there's a
It's a boundary.
Well, there's an opportunity for you to grow personally in sharing that pain. The example, it's a different type of example, but we've used it before. When one is offering oneself as a human being to another who is suffering, Mother Teresa and that sort of thing, you grow. Yes, you look at someone who is suffering and you say, well, this looks terrible, this looks diseased, this looks like I could be hurt, I better reject this, no. You open yourself up and you offer your humanity, not a solution. They're still dying, they're still poor, they're still sick. You offer what you can. They may die in the next 5 minutes, but you have offered it and grown in the offering. When these anniversaries come up, it's oftentimes a sort of a test of your own humanity to say, yeah, that was a terrible thing, and yes, I'm going to validate it. I'm going to hear you. I want to hear your story about what you went through without interjecting my story of, my broken hangnail. Yes, you have the ability to grow in accepting the experience and have it become part of you. Yes, now you know that even something as horrible as that can be experienced and was experienced and can be learned from and can help you become greater. It's not something you would want to choose for yourself. It's an experience which we would all wish to avoid. But even the accepting of another's experience allows you to grow in your humanity. It still takes courage.
And it's a witnessing.
Exactly.
It's a witnessing that is happening. It's not that you're receiving their pain and then forever you're going to be holding their pain. What you're doing is you are a set of eyes and a human heart that's sees the experience and witnesses to the other person that, yes, you have gone through this and you're still standing. You're still here to be able to communicate this to me. And I see it and I hold it as something very precious in my heart. Although I understand this is your pain, my heart cries for the pain. You're not crying because you are experiencing that other person's pain. You are crying because your heart understands that that hole is something that we all have. When you touch that hole in your heart, only tears come. It is a very real experience, and very few people willing to acknowledge that they have this, but they have courage enough to take steps into living. This is why it takes courage to live. Where you acknowledge that pain within you, that hole and that lack, but you also understand that it is an immeasurable gift to be able to witness for another person something as intimate as that loss. Because it's a witness to the glory that love really is.
Exactly. And you should also feel in some ways honored. Somebody wants to share something like that with you.
Always, yes.
I think it's one thing that, to take one more swing at it, is that if someone wishes to share with you a remembered pain, the immediacy of pain is just there. If you're watching someone go through pain, you're both experiencing it in some regard. But if you didn't know anything about this, and yet somebody trusts you enough to say, I lost a child, this is what happened, you should feel not frightened, not unoverwhelmed, honored. Because in essence what they're saying to you is, I trust you enough. Maybe my trust is ill-founded, but I think I can trust you enough with something which is very dear to me and very, very close to my heart. Joy is close to one's heart, but suffering is right there next to joy. There are two sides of the same coin. And sharing joy with another is always, you say, well, you always want to share your joy and cover your pain, but sharing pain with another is a very intimate experience.
Yes, it has to do with intimacy. And intimacy of the human heart is something that is amazingly precious. And with that, we've come to the end
of our precious time.
Together. So, I'm Margaret.
And I'm Michael. And thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Yes, for listening.